Pay close attention. What you're about to see is Bible prophecy being fulfilled.
Welcome to another edition of YPN News, bringing you news as it relates to Bible prophecy and foretold by Yeshua Hawkins. Well, we begin our broadcast today with the ongoing conflict in the Middle East. Israel has recently closed the Al-Aqsa Mosque due to continual fighting, and the Palestinian president has responded by saying this dangerous escalation is a declaration of war on the Palestinian people. He also said that Israel does not have the authority to close down such an important place of prayer for Muslims. Now, for Muslims, this important site is believed to be the place where their prophet ascended into heaven on a horse. And for the Jews, it is a place where the third temple is to be established and where the prophet Abraham almost sacrificed his son Isaac.
Now, the Palestinian president has been referencing to a third intifada, meaning the violence could escalate out of control. To add to everything, there's Sweden, who's the first country in the European Union to recognize a Palestinian state. Now, so there's pressure not only from amongst between Israel and Palestine, but now you have the pressure coming from the international arena as well.
That's right. Hala Abdullah of the Palestinian Legislative Council stated in an interview that he believes Israel has decided to close Al-Aqsa Mosque. He said he believes Israel is launching a war on four fronts. First, the Palestinian, by denying them to worship and closing their holiest site. He says this is an aggression that has to be responded to. It has to be responded to because it's crossing a red light. In other words, it's kind of where they drew the line. Now this is going over that right there. And that has been set by the EU and others in the international community. He said, secondly, Israel has launched a war against the Muslims. Al-Aqsa Mosque is the first site of the Muslims and the third holiest site of the Muslims, that being 1.5 billion Muslims.
Wow. Now, third, it is launching a war with Jordan because Jordan has an agreement with Israel as the custodian of this site, and by violating this agreement, Israel is ending its commitment to keep its peace agreement with Jordan. And fourth, it is launching a war against the international community that stands for international law, the right of the Palestinians and self-determination, and against any act of Israel unilaterally to cross the red light from instigating violence from all parts.
Right. Well, now turning our attention to another hot point in world affairs, Russia, the EU, and Ukraine are making headlines this week after signing a much anticipated gas bill that will restart gas distribution to Ukraine and parts of Europe. YPN's Larry McGee has our report on the specifics. And Larry, what are the details in this deal?
Well, to start, after being cut off from Russian gas supplies over reported pricing and debt dispute back in June, the Ukraine, according to the new deal, will pay $378 per 1,000 cubic meters until the end of 2014. The price will then be reduced to $365 from the start of 2015, with supplies scheduled to be resumed promptly following the Ukraine's payment of $1.45 billion of its current gas debt to Russia within the coming few days. By the end of the year, in total, the Ukraine is slated to pay $3.1 billion to Moscow with the assistance of the European Union and the International Monetary Fund. The agreement is being hailed as a win-win for all parties, with Russia getting its desired prices, the Ukraine getting the hand that it needs with its debt payments, and the EU, of course, gets access to Russian gas supplies for the European nations, which are heavily dependent on Russian gas. The deal comes right as the term is ending for the current European leadership, who are leaving behind the legal framework to ensure continued supply at least until the year 2019, and are claiming victory for the European nations and their ongoing battle to protect their lifestyle. For YPN News, I'm Larry McGee. Katan Jeff, back to you.
It sounds like they're pretty serious about not doing anything to hurt that oil.
Well, U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry seems to have taken a rather awkward U-turn. Washington is now reaching out to Moscow and Tehran for ways to negotiate with the Assad government, which America had previously wanted to remove.
Right. During the 6th annual Washington Ideas Forum, Secretary of State John Kerry commented on the most recent U.S. strategy toward Syria. Even though Kerry acknowledged that the U.S. is currently using military force to carry out airstrikes within a sovereign country, the Secretary of State said the crisis can only be resolved through diplomacy, not force.
He said, "We are flying planes into Syria, and Syria is not trying to shoot them down. We are targeting ISIL. We are trying to build a force that can have an impact on Assad's decision-making so we can get back to a table where we could negotiate a political outcome, because we all know there is no military resolution of Syria."
Right. Kerry goes on to say, so that's what we're trying to get back to, and we've reached out to the Russians. There have been conversations with the Iranians, and there's been conversations with the Saudis.
Now, there has been some opposition to the Secretary of State's ideas. Among those opposed to the U.S. among those who are opposed is U.S. Secretary of Defense Chuck Hagel. He is not pleased with how the administration is currently handling this Syrian crisis.
He insists that unless the U.S. sharpens its approach toward the Syrian government, all the gains it has made against the Islamic State will be lost. And Jeff, some experts believe that ultimately the U.S. strategy to remove Assad under the guise of fighting the Islamists.
Well, former Pentagon official Michael Malouf says Hagel's viewpoints is highly influenced by the surrounding Arab countries. Mr. Malouf says their goal in joining the coalition in bombing Syria was not to go after ISIS so much, but to go after the Assad regime, and also to give the Free Syrian Army time to get training and to get equipped so that they can go back in and ultimately go after the Assad regime.
Now we're going to bring it back a little bit from the Middle East back to the United States here as we bring a report on a teacher from Grandview Heights Middle School. That's in Shelby County, Tennessee. She said she's had enough. At a recent school board meeting, math teacher Danita Martins shocked listeners as she described the violence and disrespect from some of her students. She said, "I had a student take a calculator and beat another student upside the head. Broke the calculator, was not suspended."
Now, Martin told members of the Shelby County School Board that student behavior at Grandview Heights Middle is at an all-time low. She described another situation where a student got a scissors and started making a stabbing motion, but when she went to administration, they said, "Well, he was already suspended earlier today. What am I supposed to do?"
I bet that'd be frustrating, extremely. Well, Miss Martin also described the blatant verbal disrespect she was shown. She said, "I'm called by my students gay, lesbian, dyke, sir, and my favorite, white girl." Well, these and other verbal assaults were the primary reason for her pending resignation. "Students tell me, 'Who the F-bomb do you think you are speaking to?' and 'Shut the F up talking to me.' But they go unpunished," she says.
Now, teachers were not the only ones who had had enough of the current lack of self-control situation. One parent Latrina Robertson, plans on moving her son out of the school as soon as possible.
Right. Well, we're going to, if you remember, we did a little episode there, a segment of a speech that Russian President Vladimir Putin did at a recent event in Sochi. We're going to take a look at another segment of that speech. What we'd like you to do is really look at what he has to say and notice how he chooses his words concerning what he sees going on in the international community. Take a look at this.
So what are we looking at if we choose to live without rules? No matter how uncomfortable and stringent those rules are. And now such a scenario cannot be ruled out either, considering the tension in the world nowadays. Some trends enable us to give a forecast, and that is not very optimistic unless we manage to create a clear system of mutual responsibilities and arrangements. Then we will see trends for global anarchy increasing. Even today, we see an increased risk of conflicts, of a number of conflicts involving a number of large powers. And together with traditional state-on-state contradictions and disparities, you actually see new types of conflicts at the borders of some global civilizational areas or masses. We see those borderline states becoming the arena for conflicts. We will speak about Ukraine a lot, but of course I think that this conflict reveals the whole split and the whole cleavage, and I don't think this is the last conflict we are.
Interesting he comments so much on we have to have those rules.
That's right.
Well, whether we're talking about schools, places of business, even nations will not have peace unless the morals of peace are diligently taught and practiced. Now, if you have a child that is being bullied or having difficulty in school, the Peaceful Solution is here to help. Contact the House of Yahweh today and ask them about the premier character education program that has been changing the hearts and minds of people all across the world. Here's how.
Now, when you contact the House of Yahweh, don't forget to request your free copy of the Prophetic Word magazine and the monthly newsletter. To contact the House of Yahweh, you can write them at the House of Yahweh, P.O. Box 2498, Abilene, Texas 79604. You can call them at 1-800-613-9494. Visit them on any one of their websites at www.yahweh.com, www.yisroelhawkins.com, or www.yahwehsbranch.com. You can email them at info@yahweh.com, and for all calls outside the United States, please call the number on your screen.
Well, don't go anywhere. Up next is Yisroel Hawkins. From all of us here at YPN News, I'm Jeffrey Heimerman.
And I'm Katan Alexander.
Thanks for watching.